Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to The Walk. Today is Thursday, October 17th, and we just saw that King Joachim was taken to Babylon by King Nebuchadnezzar and removed from his position of leadership, and King Zedekiah is now being placed in that leadership. Within that, King Zedekiah has basically signed, I don't want to say he signed a treaty, but he has agreed to stay loyal to the king of Babylon. However, Zedekiah decided, nope, I don't like the way the king of Babylon is doing things. I'm going to rebel. I'm going to go against my word. And he has reached out to Egypt, the Pharaoh of Egypt, for some help in that rebellion. That brings us to verse 8. And we're still in that analogy, that allegory of being planted by the waters. We've got the two eagles. We got that cedar tree. All of that we've covered earlier this week. Verse 8, it had been planted on good soil by abundant waters, that it might produce branches and bear fruit and become a noble vine. So King Zedekiah and his people were planted where they should have thrived. And initially they did thrive, and then they became arrogant and thought, that the blessings that they've got is all to their credit, and they turned to that idolatry. They also turned away from that King Nebuchadnezzar and reached out to Egypt for assistance. Verse 9, thus says the Lord God, will it thrive? Will he not pull up its roots and cut off its fruit so that it all withers? So that all its fresh fruiting leaves wither? It will not take a strong army or many people to pull it from its roots. Behold, it is planted. Will it thrive? Will it not utterly wither when the east wind strikes it? Wither away on the bed where it sprouted. So God is saying, even though it's been planted, even though it's got everything it needs, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to thrive. And here comes this east wind. Well, of course, I've got curious about that. In the Fire Study Bible, it says that the east wind refers to the Babylonian army. Because Judah's last king, Zedekiah, broke the oath of allegiance, which he had made in the Lord's name with Nebuchadnezzar, he would be taken captive to Babylon and would die there. In the Apologetic Study Bible, it gave us this little reminder. The fifth reason that Judah fell was because of her trust in political alliances instead of the Lord. Remember, Zedekiah went to Egypt for help. He didn't call on the Lord for help. He went to Egypt. Commentators generally agree on the interpretation of this parable of the great eagle and the cedar. The weight of evidence suggests that the story was about Judah's dependence upon alliances with Nebuchadnezzar. The great eagle, that represents, at the same time, in secret treaty with another great eagle, Pharaoh, Hophra, Judah hoped to gain independence from Babylon's control. But Hophra's kingdom withered and was no longer a factor when Zedekiah was finally overthrown. So he put all his allegiance in Pharaoh, and you know what? His kingdom withered and it fell apart. Then we get to verse 11. Then the word of the Lord came to me. Say now to the rebellious house, do you not know what these things mean? Tell them, behold, the king of Babylon came to Jerusalem and took her king and her princes and brought them to Babylon. And he took one of the royal offspring and made a covenant with him, putting him under oath. The chief men of the land he had taken away. So in the Cultural Study Bible, what that means is that Zedekiah is recognized as a member of the Davidic dynasty. The expression has an exact Akkadian counterpart, underlining legitimacy of a king in contrast to a usurper who was called a son of nobody. Now, this made a treaty, put under oath, what those phrases mean is that these treaties and loyal oaths were a specific political terminology from the sphere of international treaties calls attention to Ezekiel's main contention, Zedekiah's breach of the vassal treaty with the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. So then we get to verse 14, and verse 14 says that the kingdom might be humble and not lift itself up, and keep his covenant that it might stand. But he rebelled against him by sending his ambassadors to Egypt, that they might give him horses and a large army. Will he thrive? Can one escape who does such things? Can he break the covenant and yet escape? And then it says in verse 16, as I live, declares the Lord, surely in the place where the king dwells, who made him king, whose oath he despised, and whose covenant with him he broke, in Babylon he shall die. Pharaoh and his mighty army and a great company will not help him in war, when mounds are cast up and siege walls built to cut off many lives. He despised the oath by breaking the covenant, and behold, he gave his hand and did all these things. He shall not escape. Therefore, thus says the Lord God, as surely as I live, surely it is my oath that he despised, and my covenant that he broke. I will return it upon his head. Now, those are some very, very strong words. And what does that mean? Well, what it means is that Zedekiah is not going to be tolerated for breaking the oath and swearing that oath to the Lord and turning his back on it. We've got to keep in mind, where do our loyalties lie? We promised to let him be Lord of our lives when we entered into that relationship. And I know that there's many times where we turn our back on it. We've got to be aware of where our loyalties should lie. Have a wonderful day. God bless, and keep walking the walk.